All right. This next story here, believe it or not, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is back in the news again. I know how you feel. She just doesn't want to seem to go away. But it is what it is. It is what it is. But this time she was actually interviewed on CNN, and she was asked about RFK Jr. and people like Joe Manchin challenging Joe Biden. Now, for those who are not aware, there is a group called the No Labels Party that's actually actively been trying to recruit Joe Manchin to run as a third party candidate to kind of mess things up for Joe Biden. Now, it's really interesting because some of those same people don't want Cornel West to run as a third party candidate, right? So just think about this. We'll get into the no labels thing in just a second, but I want you to hear what she says here when she is asked, you know, what should we do about people like RFK Jr. and people like Joe Manchin who are choosing to challenge Joe Biden? And they kill me with this as if Joe Biden is not allowed to be challenged. He's just supposed to get reelected, and he's not supposed to be pushed back at all just because he's already in that seat. Isn't that the craziest thing you've ever heard? But that's how a lot of people feel in this country. It's really ridiculous. Shout out to K-Steady QB for this tweet, or not this tweet, excuse me, but this clip. Thank you so much. Let's dive right in.
But what do you have to say to RFK Jr. About those comments, and what should the Democratic Party do about him? He seems to be hanging around, continuing to run in this race against Joe Biden for the Democratic nomination. Obviously, he's not going to win, but he's going to continue to generate these kinds of headlines, it seems.
Well, he's certainly not someone that I think represents any of the values of the Democratic Party. What I think is really critical for this week is that the Republican Party, Jim Jordan, Speaker McCarthy, and the Weaponization Select Subcommittee that I sit on actually invited Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to testify about the so-called weaponization of government in front of our subcommittee on Thursday.
Let's pause here for just a second. So I want to bring that up as well. So she said that he doesn't represent the values of the Democratic Party, but I don't even know what the values of the Democratic Party are anymore. Do you? I mean, what are the values now? The Democratic Party has moved further to the right. So there's that. He seems to stand with the state of Israel. That seems to be a value of the Democratic Party. Oh, we'll get into that story. So what exactly is she referring to? What she means is that he's not one of their chosen ones. He's not a part of the team. He's not one of the cool kids. He says some things that they don't agree with. He doesn't use the standard Democratic Party talking points, except for when it comes to Israel. He doesn't use those standard talking points. Therefore, he's not one of us, is what she's saying, basically. Now, Thursday, which I forgot to mention this, apparently RFK Jr. is supposed to appear to testify in front of Congress Thursday in reference to that weaponization of the federal government. And she's basically saying that because of the comments, I'm not going to say it on here, but because of the comments that he made recently, everybody knows he's got a lot of pushback and backlash for that on Twitter in reference to things that happened in the pandemic and who he felt it targeted. She said that his invitation should be rescinded. So that's what she's talking about there. We'll see if that happens, if they rescind the invitation or if they continue to let him speak. Let's go on.
That invitation should never have been issued, but now it should be rescinded. He has absolutely no credibility, and beyond that, because he has made these vile, xenophobic, dangerous statements, he should not be allowed to come in front of a congressional committee and make matters worse and even more dangerous. So they need to rescind his invitation. He should be nowhere near the U.S. Capitol.
Okay, so that's her opinion there about RFK Jr. And then she goes on to explain how she feels about Joe Manchin and this potential run with no labels. Now, from what I understand, he's supposed to speak in New Hampshire under the No Labels Party organization. Usually that's a sign, right?
Let me shift to presidential politics. We've been talking today about this No Labels political group. And as you know, West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin is headlining an event for them tomorrow. How much could a Manchin third-party candidacy hurt Joe Biden's chances in 2024? Speaking of calling colleagues, I mean, do you think that Democrats need to start calling Joe Manchin and say, knock this off, essentially?
So again, notice how they frame it, hurt Joe Biden, as if it's supposed to just be given to him. It should just be given to him. He's not supposed to be challenged in any way, shape, or form. And it's just so bizarre to me, this idea that because you already sit in the seat, you should just be able to have re-election and not have any pushback. So again, he's like, this is going to hurt Joe Biden. That the point of elections is for people to see, first of all, you're supposed to debate, and for the people to see who they think the best person is for the job. And it is very obvious that Joe Biden is not the best person for the job anymore. If people just wake up and pay attention, it's very clear. He's falling asleep. He's falling down. He's getting people's names wrong. He's walking over to shake hands to people who don't exist. It's very clear he's not the best person for the job, and they still want to push him through because he maintains the status quo. That's how desperate these people are. And that includes these commentators on networks like CNN. So listen to what she says about Joe Manchin. By the way, I think Joe Manchin also would still just be status quo.
I think Joe Manchin is a great U.S. senator and someone who is best suited to remain there. But I'll tell you, look, Jim, I just came
to remain where he's at. Remember who Debbie Wasserman Schultz is, you guys. Let's not forget where she comes from. Remember, she was chair of the DNC. Remember the whole DNC fraud lawsuit. This all had to deal with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, how the DNC cheated Bernie Sanders, and they gave superdelegates to Hillary Clinton in states where Bernie Sanders had won every county. That was all of her. She was all a part of that. The fact that she even still sits on a committee in reference to the weaponization of the federal government committee, the fact that she still sits on a committee after what she did during 2016 is appalling. And that's why I tell people we don't have a democracy. There's no fair-based system in this country when you let people like her, instead of asking her to fall back or demoting her, she gets promoted because she plays the game, because she follows the rules that the DNC wants. She follows the status quo of the Democratic Party. See, those people will have long careers in politics in DC. The ones who push back will not. So she says, stay where he's at.
Who is best suited to remain there. But I'll tell you, look, Jim, I just came from the supermarket to shop for my family's Sunday night family dinner. And I was struck by the thought that you wouldn't walk into a supermarket and buy a product that had no label. Why? Because you wouldn't know anything about it. You wouldn't know the ingredients. You wouldn't know what it was made of. It would be suspect. And
that is not a fair comparison. So she's trying to compare food in the grocery store to a political party. Listen to this.
And buy a product that had no label. Why? Because you wouldn't know anything about it. You wouldn't know the ingredients. You wouldn't know what it was made of. It would be suspect. And
so she's criticizing that No Labels party, which I don't even think No Labels knows what they're doing, to be honest. Like, from based on what I've read, it seems like they're all kind of all over the place. They want Democrats, Republicans, and independents. That sounds very similar to Andrew Yang's Forward Party, if you ask me. When I interviewed Andrew Yang, that's exactly what he said it was. So it just seems like the same thing done twice. It's confusing. But how can you make that comparison? Obviously, when you go to the grocery store, you're buying food that you're going to put into your body. So yes, you do need to know what the ingredients are, especially if you have like a food allergy. When it comes to a political party, and she's saying this group is called No Labels, she's like, what did that mean? It doesn't have a label. You don't even know what it is. The way that you find out what it is by their website, and you can see their policies and their views and where they stand. Just because something says Democratic Party or Republican Party, does that necessarily let us know what they are? The Democratic Party has moved further to the right. Do they even support some of the same policies that they supported a couple years ago? They say they care about women's rights, but they never tried to codify Roe v. Wade in law when they had the chance to do so. So the label doesn't really mean anything. The label can change depending on who sits in the White House that's under that party. And this is why friend of the show, Roger Meadows, continues to say political parties are a problem. This is why, because there's this idea that everything that's in that party is supposed to be just up under one umbrella, and that everyone that's a part of that shares that same belief and view. Well, we know that's not true. We know that's not true even when it comes to the Republican Party. That's why you have a Freedom Caucus who feels differently than some of their peers in the Republican Party. We know that's differently when we look at the Democratic Party, because you have people who are so-called progressives. We call them regressives. They have different views when it comes to things like Medicare for all versus the establishment Democrats in their party. So just because an organization has a label doesn't mean that everybody is in line with what that organization is about. You can have a difference of opinion, but I think that was a bad analogy to make there, Debbie. Call JB for better analogies.
And that's essentially what no labels is. No labels includes that we really don't know what they stand for. They're not a political party. They're essentially a dark money, opaque, non-transparent organization.
Now all of a sudden she has a problem with dark money. Does she have a problem with dark money that comes in to prevent progressive candidates? The dark money that came in against Summer Lee, the dark money that came in against Nina Turner. Now all of a sudden she has a problem with dark money. Get out of here, Debbie. Get out of here. Now all of a sudden, see, get it, guys? Now all of a sudden dark money is a problem because it's not a part of the Democratic Party. Now all of a sudden, oh my God, it's a dark money organization. Now all of a sudden you have a problem with dark money. But when it's a part of your party, when it's organizations like AIPAC pouring in dark money, all of a sudden you're okay with that because they're part of the Democratic Party. This woman is such a joke.
Includes that we really don't know what they stand for. They're not a political party. They're essentially a dark money, opaque, non-transparent organization. They certainly aren't structured to qualify candidates to run for president. They have to be able to report their FEC finances. So that's the last thing we need to do is have someone run on a ticket that makes it harder to understand what the candidate stands for rather than easier.
You know what a candidate stands for by their policy and their platform. Now, I still think Joe Biden, or excuse me, well, both Joes. I think Joe Manchin obviously is a horrible choice. I still do. He's in big coal, you guys. Joe Manchin doesn't care about climate. The only reason he approved that climate legislation is because he knew that there was something in it for him. That was the only way that went by. Sure, I'll do it, but there has to be something in it for me. That's it. That's how it works. So let's go ahead and see this clip here. Now they're saying Trump could benefit from no labels group pushing third party. Remember, this is the same argument that they're making about Cornel West. Listen to this.
No Labels is pushing ahead with its effort to run a third-party candidate in 2024, despite efforts by leading Democrats who fear that could split the anti-Trump vote if he is the nominee and defeat Joe Biden. Maverick, West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin is going to speak at the No Labels town hall in New Hampshire this afternoon, joined by former governor, ambassador, and presidential candidate Jon Huntsman. That raises new concerns about whether a third-party candidate could help Donald Trump by chipping away voters from President Biden. Joining me now, NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard in Manchester, New Hampshire, and the Bulwark editor-at-large Bill Kristol, founding director of Defending Democracy Together. So, Vaughn, these two, Joe Manchin, Jon Huntsman, they could make for an interesting unity ticket if they had support, but that could really hurt Joe Biden, according to all reports, all polls.
Right. Andrew, let's be clear about just how big of a step this is. Publicly, Joe Manchin is going on the campaign trail. He has not ruled out his own third-party presidential run, and he has made a decision to come with the organization No Labels here to New Hampshire today for a town hall. And No Labels is not just some small organization that's raised a couple $1,000s. Their director tells me that they are nearing a $70 million war chest to put this No Labels unity presidential ticket on the ballot in all 50 states. They are.
Let's pause for just a second. Where did all this money come from? How are they going to get 50 state ballot access all of a sudden? How can they do that so quickly? If they were able to raise all that money, millions of dollars, you know how much money or not how much money, you know what that money could have done for people in this country. We could use that money to build clinics for people, housing, give people clothes, jobs. Like do you see how much money is poured into political campaigns instead of poured into mutual aid to help out the people? I want to know how they're going to be able to get ballot access in 50 states this fast. And they just started, because it's not easy to do. Like Jill Stein will tell you, we've had this conversation, but Green Party has been organized for quite some time. So they have practice, but I'm going to tell you, it's not easy to do. So what's this really about? Let's continue.
Are serious about this. I've talked to several folks that are working as part of this effort, and they say that, look, you know, according to NBC's own polling, 70% of Americans don't want Joe Biden to be running for president again. 60% don't want Donald Trump to be running for president again. They feel like this is their opportunity to have the most legitimate, serious third-party effort in more than 100 years, dating back to when Teddy Roosevelt gave the White House another shot here. And so we have not seen this in our politics. Ross Perot sort of came out of nowhere, right? And of course, Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, they had their impacts in 2016. Ralph Nader had his in 2000. But this is something unlike we have seen in modern American politics, Andrea, potentially, if they were to actually field candidates like a Joe Manchin or a John Huntsman to run on this ticket.
What they're trying to do, let me explain this really quick. They're basically trying to do what Andrew Yang talked about. And I wonder how Andrew Yang feels about this organization, because they basically copied Forward Party. When Andrew Yang came on the show, he said, Forward Party, you could be a Republican, you could be a Democrat, you could be independent, yada, yada. It acts more so like a caucus. And you run on the issues that your constituents agree with, the things that they want. And then you do it up under the Forward Party as a third party. That's the same thing that Andrew Yang did. So it seems like to me, they saw his idea and said, hey, we could do that and let us go ahead and get a lot of money. I don't know how the hell they were able to raise like $70 million that fast. I can tell you that's not grassroots. I can tell you that much. But it seems like that's exactly what they want to do. So what they're trying to do is find a more centrist candidate and push that person. Someone who's not to the left, someone who's not to the right, someone who's in the middle, because they believe that that's the person that's going to win over more voters. This is the same thing that Andrew Yang said. So you see what they're trying to do, people? They don't want people, they really don't want candidates to run on a populist message. That's what this is really about. They don't want populist candidates. They don't want anyone that's going to run on a campaign for the workers and unionizing and workers' rights. They don't want anyone that's going to run on universal health care or Medicare for all in this country. They don't want anyone that's going to run on canceling like student loan debt, or anyone that's going to run on making college tuition free. But at the same time, they don't want a candidate that wants to, ban some of the books that talk about like sexuality and all that jazz. They don't want the people to run that are going to put strict laws in reference to like transgender community, that kind of stuff. So they are trying to find someone in the middle that can work on both sides of the aisle, because they believe that the American people actually want someone who's in the center. Problem is, those center candidates aren't running on messages that appeal to working class and poor people in this country. And that's a big part of the problem. I don't think that this would work, but we'll have to see what happens. This should be interesting.
Well, at his peak, Ross Perot got 20% of the vote, Bill Kristol. No Labels co-chair, former Senator Joe Lieberman, Democratic senator, well, then an independent, is dismissing concerns that this effort is going to help Donald Trump. He says people are overreacting. What's your take on that?
I think people are reacting correctly. I'm not an enemy of No Labels. I did some work for them in 2017 for the think tank side on what a centrist agenda might look like with my friend Bill Galston. So I'm not against promoting centrism, but the fact is every No Labels is not going to win. The No Labels candidate is not going to win in this polarized country in 2024. The Democrat and the Republican will each get about 40%, at least. No Labels might get 20%. Every piece of evidence, from polling to history, suggests that more of that 20% will come from Joe Biden than Donald Trump. Trump's support is more solid, more committed. There'll be some centrists who will be seduced into voting for someone younger than Joe Biden, what looks like a centrist ticket. And so it could well defeat Joe Biden. And it is not responsible centrism. It is not responsible moderation to elect Donald Trump.
What the hell is responsible moderation and responsible centrism? I would argue, I don't think any of, at least the presidents we've had in my lifetime, have been responsible, so to speak. I'm like, what is this really about? What are you talking about? This is a mess. Aye.
And Bill, I know you already met with No Labels and tried to make this argument. You also, on the Democratic side, have RFK Jr., a Democratic presidential candidate, pushing COVID conspiracy theories. Last week in a video.
Yep, and we're stopping there. And we're going to cut out at that part. But you guys get the point. You see what they're trying to do. Now, again, I don't agree with Joe Manchin. I wouldn't vote for Joe Manchin. But the thing is, this idea that like a incumbent president cannot be challenged, or how dare people run through a third party or run as an independent? We don't know who else is going to run yet. We don't know. Elections next year. How dare you? And then they'll actually have the nerve to argue that we need to protect our democracy, but we don't really have one. What they want is to tell you who that person should be, select that person, and tell you that's the person that you vote for. They don't really want you to stop and think about, well, maybe I want to hear from all the people who are running and I want to see what they're running for. They don't want you to hear any of that. Hell, if it was up to them, they'd probably say we would never have debates, even in the general. What if they do that? What if they say, what if it's Trump Biden again? And what if this time around they say no general debates at all? None. MSNBC pulled away from Trump's speech because they didn't want him to have a campaign speech the night when he had the press conference about his indictment, the first indictment. They pulled away from it. They said, we don't want him to do a campaign speech on here. So if they don't want him to do a campaign speech, and if it turns out that it's Biden and Trump between the Democrats and the Republicans, what if they say we're not having a debate because we don't want Trump to speak? Now, you want to talk about people being angry? You want to talk about, I bet you people would get out in the streets about that. People would be mad. People would be really angry. I'm going to go to some of these comments and then we'll go to the next story. Thank you for the super chat, Nicole. Read that poll wrong. I'm tired. I mean, no, that's okay. Denise says she wants to censor RFK from testifying about censorship. Thank you, Frank. Debbie always talks like she has a mouthful of crap. Well, I guess she does. LOL. Thank you also, Frank, for this one. Didn't Debbie try to fix the election for Hillary and still failed? Go away, Debbie. We don't want to play with you. I know. She hasn't gone away yet. JB says, I wouldn't answer Debbie's call. She's the worst. As I said, Debbie should ask him about analogies. Frank, thank you for this. No labels, but she is labeling everyone. That's a good point. Dwayne says, Sabby Sabs, no labels is an establishment attempt to divert those angry at both parties towards more corporate Democrats, period. There you go. Thank you for the super sticker, Aberdeen71. And thank you again, Frank. Bill Kristol is still alive. Yes. I hate to hear and see him talk. So arrogant. Yeah, I know. I know, man. It's that good healthcare plan. Just kidding. Thank you, Sensational. Politician stock ban. There you go. All right. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Hey, Sabs, maybe Jamie can give us another one of them Black Lives Matter kneel in front of the bank vault, and this will all go away. Perhaps Hoffman, too. Maybe.